three student representatives themselves, and keeping their viewpoint in mind, we got a great insight in terms of what's their perspective. And the third part of it is obviously what can we look at in terms of policy and scalability perspective. So coming from the industry standpoint, India has multiple industry groups which have adopted their own independent training mechanisms. And while this has happened, there is a degree of debate in terms of the confidence in the certification or skill progress itself, or skill programs itself, because of which, or the fact that the skill programs on the certification is not getting them the right quality of manpower. However, this can be done only by large industrial groups. So what can we do in terms of looking at it and picking up the best lessons from there and creating a system which is then extendable for MSMEs, which are basically the backbone of the nation, to take it forward? The second thing which the industry groups also came up with, the fact is, not only do they need manpower for their own skills, for the people whom they hire, but they also tend to work with a lot of third-party suppliers who end up doing a lot of the initial jobs. So how can we have a certification level which can actually be implemented not just at the industry hiring stage itself, but also at the hiring stage of what the industry third-party suppliers require? So almost akin to the fact that can we have a layered certification approach, which actually makes a lot of sense given what you shared with us in terms of what you're doing in Singapore, which allows these students to therefore go back and go on to the means of continuous learning, which is imperative. Before I get into the other themes which were of interest, more from a policy setting perspective, it's also interesting to see what the students themselves highlighted. We had a couple of students who said, who had the privilege of operating across two different ITI environments, and what immediately struck them as the wow factor was the place where they could get hands-on experience in terms of machines. And they said that as far as these vocational trainings are concerned, there's a need to really dial down on the theoretical aspect and instead dial it up with a lot more of the hands-on experience. I think, Mr. Poe, what you shared in terms of the work environment which you have in your training institutes, where you have state-of-the-art tools and machinery for students to work on, is exactly, I think, what set their minds aflutter in terms of saying this is what will interest them. I'll also tie it up with a point which Professor Ashwini made in the previous group, because we also had that same point coming again in our group itself, which is how do we make it aspirational for students? And to put it in perspective, it's almost as if we are operating in a situation where there is a vicious cycle at play. We have students who end up enrolling for these certification programs, and either the certification program itself is not meeting the entire industry requirement, or there's a language barrier, or the third thing which came out, the confidence barrier itself, which is a bit of a social issue as to are these jobs seen as really aspirational, because of which they might end up in a situation where despite the certification they may not have a job. And that in reality is a vicious cycle, because that ensures that we are not going to have more people coming in for this certification programs. And I think this is an area which needs to be looked into. The policy highlights which was shared in the morning itself suggests, as it is going to be an integral part of a school curriculum, just like what has happened in other countries, including Finland, etc., where children as young as in the 8th standard are introduced to the TVET system. And once that happens, I think the aspirational level, the social disconnect which some of our students might feel will get addressed. So to that extent, that appeared to be ratified in the deliberations in our breakaway group itself. Coming back to the third perspective was, from the industry standpoint, was also not just the students, how are we going to ensure that the trainers are constantly going to be re-certified and recalibrated. And in fact, the point which came where every 3 years you are rotating your curriculum and therefore trainers need to be retrained was something which was immediately noticed by us as a recommendation, which we would like to put forward. No policy is going to be comprehensive unless and until we are able to look into how are we enabling the trainers to also constantly upgrade in terms of their skills. So, given these industry and student perspectives, the third thing which I want to basically highlight on is the fact which came across in our group itself is the fact that whereas we got the best of examples from Singapore, the reality is India is at a different scale altogether. So, in today's day and age, it may not be possible for us to kind of create an integrated framework which takes care of all that has been done already. And instead, one of the ideas which emerged from the group was how can we take the best of lessons from those industry groups which have invested in creating their own parallel systems, and how can we use it as a quick fix in terms of creating immediate certification programs. The last point which I want to highlight in the interest of time is the fact that it may not be possible, again going back to the fact that there were 23 industry clusters and 34 skills which they looked at. Our scale is entirely different. So it may not be possible for us to address all the industry clusters at one go. But one of the examples which was highlighted by Singapore in terms of the level of industry partnership which helped them to actually create a breakthrough program. Maybe it's something which we want to do for one of our new clusters, and the Singapore team did highlight the fact that selection of the partner is very, very critical because you want to have the partner put skin in the game. And to that extent, one has to think through in terms of what are the gives and gets which we are going to make offer for a partner to really invest in terms of developing a program in the long term. So with that, I'll kind of close some of the points. There were lots more of discussions. I don't think we could have done justice to the breadth of the topic, and hopefully this just set the ball rolling rather than having the final takeaway on this. Thank you again for the opportunity to represent my group.
Thank you. And now for the last breakaway session, may I request session facilitator to please join us and give us the summarization of this session.
So ladies and gentlemen and esteemed dignitaries, I want to get started with the voice of the student. Let me sum up. For me, the most exciting takeaway was what the student said. Now, the student said three things. Number one, she gave specific example. Look at artificial intelligence. Said there are many professors talking about the theories of artificial intelligence. She said, while theory is fine, but practice in the lab is equally important, if not more important. An academic institution must give credit to both of them. So this was one highlight. The second highlight was that respect for skilled professionals. So there is a problem with dignity of labor, dignity of certain number of skills. And our third point was not just hard skill, but also soft skills. So this was one of the things that she mentioned, and I thought I must take this as an input. Now moving on, our topic was lifelong learning and skill recognition in the context of future of work. I don't know if slides pop up, otherwise it doesn't matter. I would like to share with you that both the subgroups, we had three subgroups, we merged them into two. One common appreciation was data-led decision-making for skilling initiatives. So we looked at what Singapore does, for example. They use big data and they buy databases from heterogeneous applications to understand not only what is the requirement of skill today, but what is the requirement in future. Now, in our group, one of the discussions was that the demand is changing very fast. And we cannot just be talking about collaboration between academia and industry, but it got to be very intensive collaboration, because the impact of technology on the new demand of skill is very, very high. So there was a focus on how do we really ensure that industry and academia actually takes collaboration to the next level. That was one of the points which was highlighted. I must share with you that when we looked at the Singapore model, I think there is a lot that India can learn, how both the large industries and the MSMEs can push their demand on an ongoing basis, and that database on demand is available on real time in an integrated data lake. So that was one thing that we really liked in the Singapore model. And they just don't go by whatever data is pushed. What we saw, there is a research-driven analysis of what is that is validated. So we felt that could be a very good insight. Now, the members from Singapore, they were very inspired with India's digital movement in terms of how we have made payment processes digital, how we have moved from a cash economy to a digital economy. So they felt that if India could do a similar revolution in the skilling sector, where a person understands that if I have a skill and join an organization, it doesn't mean that's the skill that he or she need to deliver lifelong, because number of skills that we need to acquire will be more, and probably the frequency is going to be also more. So there was a focus and a suggestion that if India could set an example of creating a mindset, okay, all the members felt that skilling, continual learning, lifelong learning also involved a mindset change. Just like India did move from physical payment to digital payment mode, we should also do this revolution of changing the mindset of people, that learning got to be continual, learning got to be lifelong. Thank you. And I must thank both the panelists, expert member, Wei Jian, and I would also like to thank Shavlin. I must tell you, they got tremendous knowledge. Let's give a big hand for them.
Thank you. With that, we have summarized the 3 breakaway sessions that we had today. And now may I request Professor Deepamani to come on stage, and then she will be moderating this panel discussion.
No, I can just. Thank you all. That was, and thank you, to the faculty from ISB for that summary of the 3 breakout sessions. Like we said, the objective at the start was to try and understand best practices as well as policy responses that enable the creation of a robust and dynamic TVET ecosystem that is responsive to the needs of labor markets, that allows for creation of progressive pathways for students, and enables continual learning over the life of different classes of learners. we thought we would shift this discussion to move into the realm of policy and get a sense of the kinds. You have an incredibly, an incredible panel here of policymakers whose experience, rich experience, knowledge and expertise that we would like to draw on to round off this whole discussion and workshop. And we have questions on specific initiatives. We have questions on reforms that they have undertaken in their respective countries. And we hope that, that discussion will complement the speakers' summaries so far to give all of us here in this room a sound understanding of not just what we've done so far, but where we want to go and how we get there, right? So that's the objective of this. And I would like to start with Dr. Kalsi. Sir, if you could tell us a little bit about, we've spoken a lot about reforms. We've also spoken about the need for integration of vocational training with education in order to, make it aspirational. So if you could tell us a little bit about the measures that have been taken by the Indian government and the regulators for integration of education and vocational training for the skilling ecosystem in general. If you could touch about one or two key points, that would be very valuable. Thank you.
Thank you so much. See, for integration of skilling and vocational education into every level of education, starting from school education to higher education, even for the students who are out of the school, India has come up with a wonderful framework. First of all, it was Policy NEP 2020, which allowed us such integration. And then that intent was converted into a framework, which is the National Credit Framework. So the National Credit Framework allows us to integrate any kind of learning, including your academics, your skilling, and your experiential learning into credits. It converts everything into credits, and that is how we integrate skilling into all levels of education. Now, if I talk about some of the major initiatives, once the NCRF has come, as we call it, National Credit Framework, we have aligned all our systems to NCRF. That is the second step which we are taking. For example, we have rationalized our National Skill Qualification Framework, our level descriptors, our National Higher Education Qualification Framework with NCRF. Similarly, the assessment framework, the training of trainers framework, training of assessors framework. Now, all those, they need to be aligned. We are working on these. Some of these have been notified, some are being notified. Also, we have brought out the concept of NOSES and micro-credentials. That wherever you want micro-skilling, or you want upskilling, or you want reskilling, you don't want to teach the entire subject. A person who wants to go for lifelong learning, now during the service, if he wants to learn something, that is micro-credential. That is NOS-based training. Similarly, multi-skilling and cross-sectoral skilling, we have brought out guidelines. We have also brought out very robust recognition of prior learning policy. Now, this is for the entire ecosystem, right from the ITIs, right up to engineering colleges, polytechnics. No, everyone is covered. We are also working on future skill identification, their development, their alignment with our qualification frameworks. So far, we have worked on more than 300 such skills. Now, these skills are now being pushed into the school level because that's where the interest lies for most of the students. Also in the engineering colleges. Now, all these 300 future skills, they are available on the NQR. They can be adopted by others. Another thing what we have done is the OEM-based qualification framework we have brought out. Now, what is this OEM-based qualification which we are recognizing? So there are a number of companies which have their own qualification developed. For example, Microsoft, Oracle, IBM, they all have their own qualifications. So far, these qualifications, though were being taken by the students, they were not creditized. No credits were given for such qualifications. Now, all these qualifications, no, they have also been NSQF aligned and approved qualifications. And these qualifications can be offered by schools, by colleges, by polytechnics, by AICT institutions, and they can be creditized. They can be part of the total credits which they have to earn for the award of a degree. So that is possible. Similarly, we have integrated 12 employability skills in every qualification. And these 12 employability skills have digital skills, they have some kind of payment, digital payment skills, communication skills, English skills. All these skills have been integrated. Then integration of the internship, apprenticeship, and OJT, on-the-job training. So that has been done, that has been allowed. Even for the engineering colleges, if somebody goes in for 6 months internship, he can get those credits, and those credits would be counted towards the award of his degree. So that has been done. Similarly, enablers for PWDs, people with disabilities, those are also being worked out separately. And lastly, international equivalence and mobility. That is one area where we are concentrating. We are working very closely with other countries. For example, recently we had concluded a few things with Australia. Similarly, we are also keen to work with Singapore. So these are some of the initiatives. Then blended learning is one initiative that I would like to mention. Singapore started such a program way back in 1997 where they integrated only ICT. But we have integrated the ICT, all digital resources, simulation, digital twins, metaverses, and further deepened this integration of skilling into the education. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Kalsi. Thank you so much. So Leong, I'm going to move to you. And one of the things that even came out from your breakaway session was this emphasis on lifelong learning. And I thought it would be useful for us to get an understanding of some of the what you have seen as the most impactful initiatives that the Singapore government has undertaken to affect lifelong learning amongst workers.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought maybe to address your question in a slightly different way and to think of the policy thinking behind some of these initiatives rather than to talk about the initiatives.
Sure.
So a good part since we have launched the Skills Future movement in 2015, a good part of our energy was focused on making continuing education and training accessible, affordable, making sure that there is training that's of high quality, that's industry relevant, they can meet companies' manpower needs and will lead to individuals' good employment outcomes, right? And our ongoing work to build a high-quality integrated skills ecosystem with diverse training providers is a major enabler, right? That diversity, just to give you a snapshot, will comprise, for example, our institutes of higher learning, the 6 autonomous universities, 5 polytechnics, and ITE. Together, they train about 350,000 adult learners last year, right? Quality private training providers that can augment the training landscape. And increasingly, we are bringing enterprises on board, right? We believe that CET needs to be a demand-led approach, not just a supply-push strategy. Just building off what the previous panelists said, right? Involving industries and designing industry-based certification. We are also stepping up workplace learning capabilities, making an effort to involve industry in co-designing, co-delivering training with our institutes of higher learning. That diversity is actually important, right? It's key to cater to the heterogeneous needs of adult learners. And we are talking about learners with different ages, from different ages, educational profiles, skills needs, right? And if I were to take a step back and think a bit about the larger driving forces, actually with the acceleration of technological disruptions ahead, individuals are likely to have to go through multiple careers in their lifetime, right? So increasingly, this shift is taking place in Singapore when we understand that it cannot just be the first 15 years of formal education, right? We can't just front-load education and expect the first 15 years of education, formal education, to prepare individuals for their entire working life. In fact, individuals need to be able to, in a more agile manner, right, upskill, reskill between careers, and we are thinking about skills top-up. In some cases, even skills reboot if they have to move across sectors. And Singapore is going through this transition. We're evolving some of our policy thinking along, reorganizing our skills future ecosystem, just to support individuals in pursuing training, right? And pursuing training for the next 40 to 50 years of their working life, right? And there's a bit of that reorientation of the ecosystem. And we are looking at doing this at speed and at scale, right? We estimate that about 1 in 5 Singaporeans and Singaporean workers will require reskilling in Singapore every year. And this translates to several hundred thousands of workers who need to be retrained. We are also doing so in a more targeted manner, focusing on more vulnerable segments. So this could be mature workers in their 40s and 50s, those who are in jobs in sectors that face higher risk of skills obsolescence and need to transition into new careers. Now, more briefly, I think another key policy thinking is to consider how to lower the opportunity cost of training for adult learners. And here we have to think about how to address some market failures, right? Rationally, I think we all know we need to upskill. But the opportunity cost of upskilling and reskilling is just high. And it gets higher as we age, right? I'm talking about financial cost of training. As we are being away from work, that you could incur financial costs, not just cost fee, but you could suffer income losses. I'm talking about time opportunity cost as well, right? So getting the support, the right blend of support measures, financial incentives right will be key. Working with employers to create the enabling conditions for training, for example, through flexi work arrangements, that will be critical as well. So will some of the capability building efforts that I talk about, getting more employers on board, workplace learning, helping them to adopt more skills-based hiring practices or HR practices. I'll take a pause here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Scaling at speed and at scale, skilling at speed and scale, keeping in mind diversity. So I want to take that question to Professor Sitaram. Those are also obviously issues that we face in our context, in an incredibly diverse country, a lot of heterogeneity across regions. So what kinds of efforts can we take to, and have we taken, to ensure that universal and equitable access to lifelong learning, keeping in mind the kind of heterogeneity and diversity that characterizes our country? Sure. Get out of your way.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to tell All India Council for Technical Education has moved from a regulator position to a facilitator position. We are trying to facilitate and particularly to push the skilling agenda to the forefront and future education, which will be a collaborative, cross-institutional and cross-cultural. In tune with NEP 2020, integrating skill development and vocational courses in regular programs of the institutions, delivering in a blended mode, including online digital learning and open university concepts. We are trying to push the agenda forward. Friends, in addition to that, what Madam was talking about, to unlock the potential of the skill ecosystem, we so far use the technology for basically for enabling the system, but we need to move further ahead. Moving the technology-led transformation will help to reach the scale. What our friend was talking about, the scale in Singapore and scale in India is quite different. We are talking about a country of 1.4 billion people with so many skill, Dr. Kalsi highlighted, maybe 300 odd different skill potentials. So we need to look at, consolidate all this and promote interoperability and create digital public goods for all to use. And that is basically what I'm talking about, the internet equivalent for skills. We need to create internet equivalent of skills. Automated and scalable forms of interaction can help improve the trust, credibility in the ecosystem. Let me also take some time to tell you, we need to also improve in India industry relevance and market responsiveness of education and skilling. Second, skilling based on demand, which many people have highlighted, rather than on supply side. Emphasis on continuous learning, reskilling and upskilling in the existing employees. And then finally, that we are all sitting together today to talking about collaboration with Singapore, internationalization. It is not just Singapore, Australia, US, or the countries which we have to look at, Europe, or the countries where bilateral, multilateral forums, we need to learn from each other. Friends, I would like to take 2 minutes of time to highlight 3 schemes of All India Council for Technical Education, which are impacting the skill in our country at a scale which nobody has seen it. Karma, Kaushal Augmentation and Restructuring Mission of AICTE, KARMA, is basically where we will, including faculty development programs, student development schemes, institutional development schemes are also being brought in, and research and innovation development schemes, along with other, inclusivity, particularly the scholarship for poor, scholarship for women. Integration is very, very key. Second, to overcome the dual challenge of scarcity of skilled manpower in jobs and low skill level of those who are presently in jobs, we are having special initiatives, and particularly we are focusing on strategically planned skilled initiative to create skilled and certified workforce within the educational domain, encouraging the institution for making best use of their infrastructure. Friends, please note that we have 9,000 plus diploma and engineering institutions in the country. They are all having a lot of infrastructure, which is available to many of these skill initiatives. Please use them. We are making it open round the clock, not just 9 to 5:30 business, round the clock, and that too we would like to include domain-specific, demand-driven. So second scheme of AICTE is the NEET, National Education Alliance for Technology, where we have personalized learning and adaptive learning we have introduced through the NEET scheme. Upskilling as per industry needs is also possible in the NEET scheme. So we have promoted the edutech companies to come on board with us on the platform. So now we are in the NEET 3.0. More than 250 edutech companies have already been shortlisted. We are actually waiting for Honorable Minister to give us time to launch this, maybe within 10-15 days. Then NEET 4.0 will be dynamic. That means every month we are going to evaluate the edutech companies and immediately upload for the skilling for the purposes. So this bridges between the educational edutech companies and industry and academia, which is a very, very key. The last but not the least program which I would like to highlight is AICTE's language, to reach out to the large section which has not be having English knowledge as the language. AICTE technical book writing in diploma and engineering, ladies and gentlemen, we have a new tool called AICTE Anuvadini tool, which is a deep learning artificial intelligence tool which can translate right now to 13 languages. Honorable Minister has asked us to do it for 22 languages, which is as per our constitution. We are working on it because we need a lot of dictionaries for that, including so we have right now translated large number of diploma books, first and second year, and the engineering books of first and second year, not run-of-the-mill books. They are actually outcome-based textbooks, which will be unique to the whole world. I will just tell you, in the last 4 months, our e-cum portal, which houses all these technical books in different languages, has had 1.5 lakh hits, and more than 47 countries have downloaded our textbooks, which are very, very interesting and forthcoming. I think the whole world will be using our textbooks. I'm very, very sure, because these are all very technology savvy books which have a very integration of the QR code, everything is there so that the students can learn beyond the syllabus within the book. So we have integrated this book, technical book writing, and these books are written by professors of IIT, NITs, and very prestigious universities within the country. There is enough resources, ladies and gentlemen. I think we can make the existing resources which is available within our system used by the skill development institutions. I think we can make a big change. For the last, I would like to say that skilling ecosystem, we have to build a coherent skilling ecosystem which encompasses all these, industries, academia, and the skill institution agencies. So where technology is going to be the major player for us, we need to use it that heavily. That is what AICT is pushing for. Thank you, madam.
Thank you very much, Professor Sitaram. I wanted to, Professor touched upon the themes of technology, data, and in the earlier speaker, Mr. Leong, also talked about how today workers have multiple careers, over the course of their lives. So I wanted to take that and lead into the next question with Mr. Bruce, which is to try and, there are obviously very many advances in technology that we're seeing around us today in terms of AI and machine learning. And as we were creating the report with OECD, we found that there are about 60% of skills today that can be done at comparable proficiency, as AI. So from that perspective, wanted to understand what are the higher order cognitive skills today that governments must focus on, in integrating into educational systems. And as some of the functional skills either become subsumed or need to be integrated better with machines, then what are the higher order cognitive skills that educational reform must focus on today? Thank you.
I think the thing about technology is always evolving, and you do not know what is coming next. And how do you enable your education system to have higher cognitive skills? I would think that the idea of 21st century skills is essential. For example, in critical thinking, communications, creativity, all these areas are essential, particularly I think in the area of critical thinking when you come to a new economy. So that will prepare the students better for this, high area of technology that's coming, in the workforce and in the industries.
Thank you very much. Critical thinking, creativity, so more emphasis on foundational skills and baseline skills in addition to specialized domain skills.
Yes, the domain skills, of course, when you go into the Institute of Higher Learning, there will be courses
Correct.
that go into all the technical areas of developing your skills. I'm talking about more the cognitive the skills that is needed to prepare them for these particular areas.
Sure, thank you. I'm going to move to Mr. Murthy and continuing this discussion on integration of vocational training with school education. If you could touch a little bit upon the reforms that have been implemented under the NEP to integrate vocational education provision with higher education, that would be useful.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'll just take off from what Dr. Kalsi and Professor Sitaram had mentioned. While Dr. Kalsi had mentioned about the National Credit Framework, that is the overarching policy that we have now in place, which has been put in place with intense consultation with all the regulators that are there in the education space. So be it AICT, UGC, NCVT, NCTE, you have all of these regulators on board, recognizing a particular framework which articulates to all the stakeholders how you're supposed to have the credits in place, how do you recognize it. To give you an example, if you have a program like Hello India in place, a student who comes out emerges from that competition, the teacher there recognizes various skills that a student has exhibited. It could be leadership, it could be teamwork, etc. Now, how do you capture all these type of traits or experiences or learnings that you have identified in a student? You have this academic bank of credits that has been put in place. The institutions in their transcripts are able to capture these types of credits that they give to these skill sets. and it's a fair and transparent manner in which any recruiter, any industry, anyone who wants to recruit can see those transcripts and see the skill sets that are there in place. Having said that, you have another facility called a DigiLocker, which is again based on an Aadhaar-based linkages, which is accessible to the student to easily show it around to the other stakeholders who are in need of it. We have another IT platform called the Samarth, which is in place, which is capturing at the institutional level. We have more than 1,200 institutions now on that platform, which captures the entire life cycle of a student. Taking that a step further, we are coming into another step called student registry. So right from the school level right up to college level, you will have a architecture in place which will capture this entire journey of that student with one number, as well as capturing all the skill sets that he has developed over his lifestyle. Now, how do you facilitate the importance of skills? You have this Swayam platform, which is another platform, which is a big platform led by IIT Madras and many other IITs to provide life skills or needful skills, and providing 40% credits to those institutions to enable them to provide those skill sets to their students. You have seen a year-on-year growth on the children who take such type of examinations. Semester-wise, now you have more than 6 lakh students who take these examinations, and those credits are brought into his transcripts itself. These are all life skills or skills that the industry requires. These programs that are put onto the Swayam platform are going to be expanded further to ensure that their skill sets or the programs or courses are the ones which industry require. Professor Sitaraman mentioned about 3 initiatives. There's another one that is there in place, which is called the internship portal, which provides avenues to students to take that experience from the industry. There we feel that the industry has a great role to play to ensure that the students get those opportunities to experience the skill sets that that industry or particular segment is looking forward to. And to facilitate that, we've got another policy in place. It's called the Professor of Practice, which ensures that across the board, whoever has that skill set can devote some time to share it with the students or that classroom. So again, encouraging industries to come forward to provide that type of skill set. And closing up, I really want to emphasize on what Professor Sitaraman mentioned, that all the educational institutions are open towards providing their facilities to the industry to ensure that industry set skills are available. The infrastructure will be ours, but we can put your skill sets and experiences open to them to ensure that the entire neighborhood of that campus can benefit from the skill sets that the industry wants to come and provide. So I thought this is the overarching framework in which we are trying to work, in which we look very keenly forward to the industry as well as academia to come and take these things forward in a greater extent.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Murthy. That does provide a very succinct summary of the different ways in which career progression pathways can be created in mainstream education as well for skilling, as well as bringing in and engaging with industry in the whole skilling process. Thank you so much for that. I wanted to move to you, Ms. Shelvin, and talk about a theme that's been talked about a lot since morning. Even it found voice even in the summary of the session 3 breakaway, takeaways from that session, which was about the use of technology. There are 2 things there. One is about skill anticipation. Clearly, everyone agrees that we're in dynamic labor markets. There's a lot of rapid technology advances, climate change, geopolitical change. There are several changes that characterize and drive change in these markets. And therefore, skill anticipation, the ability to continually anticipate and respond to skills demands becomes important. And given that in your session, there was a lot of discussion about technology and data and how that enables this. For instance, should frameworks be updated, with with high levels of frequency to allow to be responsive to labor market demands is something. So if you could touch upon the role of technology and data in being able to continually respond to dynamic markets, that would be valuable. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Testing, testing? Yes. Thanks so much for the question. I have to say, data is the new gold. And in the area of skills anticipation, data is the new gold. But it's not just data, I think. Data is the goal as well as the enabler. So I want to say that when we use data to look at skills anticipation, we use labor market intel to see how we can update using skills demand and skills supply data together. And using labor market intel also are able to show where the gaps are on a dynamic and timely basis. But of course, there are constraints to it. Our group also deliberated extensively that it requires the data to be, it requires your skills data today to be digitized. And ecosystems like in India, for example, a large part of it might not be digitized, and therefore, you might not be able to initiate that ecosystem that immediately. But I just want to add that data, there's both quantitative and qualitative data as well. So a lot of the times we use quantitative data in labor market, job posting data, which is really helpful. I know India is very known for tech skills, IT skills, and that's where I think the tempo is changing the fastest, and that's also where I think your labor market intel can be the most useful. For non-tech skills, like for example, we were talking to our gentleman in healthcare, for example, nurse training, and trade and craft, for example, you might not have this data out there. Then I think it's where we can bring employers together and tell us where the data is from within the companies. Companies out there probably already have very strong in-house systems where you can pull data from there. But again, I want to say that data and technology is the enabler. I think most importantly is what is the needs of users that we really want to address. And needs of citizens are quite different from needs of enterprises. Again, enterprises is a heterogeneous pot. There is the smaller ones, there's the medium, there's the larger ones as well. And needs of training providers are also a little bit different, as well as policymakers. So if you can identify what are some of the critical questions or the stakeholders you want to address first, then maybe it's a lot easier to say, then pull the technology and data together. And I also wanted to add that I think today we don't need to develop the data and the technology from scratch. It's already out there. Question is whether we are able to pull into a central system. And I think in the private sector, we also have many partners who are already doing this. There are many workforce analytics firms that built the AI system already. Question is, I think they only have one sliver of what's available in terms of public data. From the public agency, from government, we have other data points. In Singapore, we have data that sits within what Singapore funds, training consumption data, which private sector don't have. That's where we can see how we can make available this data to enable the data systems the private sector has to be more comprehensive and also more agile. And that's where we want to leverage on private sector to be able to reach out to the other segments of the workforce, which as a government we can't do. But together, collectively, I think we can do a lot more together. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Tiwari, I'll move to you. You know, we've talked about how, at least so far amongst the policymakers, we've talked about how you build progression pathways in education to make it more aspirational to youth, vocational training. But I wanted to also understand from you what other steps, other than, I mean, of course, building progression pathways in education, but could you comment on more generally on the steps that are being undertaken to make vocational training aspirational to the youth of the country?
Hello. Yeah, I would say that this is the heart of the problem today, and as we have noticed that the vocational training is necessary to be aspirational. And while other speakers have given in great detail what is being done in India, I would like to confine myself to the mega things which are happening.
Sure.
The first thing was that the skilling and education were brought together under one minister. And that was that preceded the, this was preceded by the National Education Policy with the National Credit Framework, National Curriculum Framework, and I would say, being the in the skilling ministry, that under the I'm not praising him, but under the overall guidance of Honorable Minister, and with the full support of my colleagues in the higher education and school education, we are doing many things which would link the skilling with education in a way of the numerous pathways. The third thing which is happening is that the use of technology which is there. And as Mr. Sitaram was saying, translating the course curriculum in regional languages would also be very important for the aspirational value. More important than that is that we are widening the learner segments. It's not necessarily as PMKY or the ITI, but we are thinking of high-end skills as well. We also have a lot of emphasis on international skilling by way of international skilling centers. And as you can notice, that skilling is no longer terminal. It's an ongoing process. And that is where Dr. Kalsi was saying micro-credentialing, NOS-based things are also happening. And of course, there are the future skills and all blended learning. We have so many QPs. We are about the future skills, Bharat skills, and all that things. And there is also by the National Credit Framework, the informal and formal way of skilling is also being recognized. So I would say that there is a lot of things which are happening, and it's just a matter of time that under the National Education Policy and the all that we are doing by use of technology and our demography. I mean, we have to have skilling as the most important thing. In fact, in the budget this time also, we can find that the skilling has made a very important part of the different sectors of the economy. So all put together, I would say that, like our Honorable Prime Minister has said, that time has come for the Hunar to be in the center stage. And it is not to deride the degrees itself, but the way the education system, higher education system, 60%, 40%, that ratio is made. The way the curriculum framework, where the world of work will be ingrained in the minds of the young people, and the different pathways which we are creating. So I'm very confident that we'll be able to improve and raise the aspirational value of the skills.
Thank you. Thank you for that summary. You have several structural process changes as well, that making it more vocational, aspirational, sorry. I wanted to move to Mr. Rong, and so Ms. Shelvan talked about skill anticipation and how it empowers workers with the right skilling recommendations. I wanted to move that question forward and talk about how you incorporate those changes in school curricula, because that's far more difficult to change and be dynamic with. Therefore, wanted to try and understand how does the Singapore government incorporate flexibility in its school curricula to be responsive and relevant to the future of work.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think we can talk about flexibility at 3 levels. So let me start by saying, when we talk about our curriculum today, it is a constant balance between what is core and foundational in terms of the knowledge, skills, and values that we want to inculcate in our young students as they grow through the system, against the evolving needs of the future. So we talk about new skills, we talk about new knowledge, for example, IT skills, and that has to be factored into a curriculum. And through our curriculum review cycles, we will adjust the balance from time to time, looking at what is most important, looking at what we can foreseeably see is needed in the future. To do that, we need flexibility at various levels. So the first level is in terms of the curricular level. We have moved away from a system that focuses a lot on testing and assessment in order to give back more time for learning to take place. Since last year, we have already removed mid-year examinations at the school level for all primary and secondary schools. And from next year onwards, we will progressively do so at the pre-university level. So by removing one critical period of testing in our school calendar, there is more time for applied learning experiences such as learning journeys locally, overseas trips, hands-on projects, partnerships with industry to provide real-life experiences to our students. So that's the first level of flexibility that we're giving to the schools. The second is one in terms of structures. From next year onwards, all our secondary schools will offer full subject-based banding. In essence, it is the removal of stream-based system in our secondary schools, where a student entering secondary school only follows on a fixed path in terms of the subject offerings. With full subject-based banding, a student's aspirations can be better met because they can offer different subjects at different levels. So for subjects where they have the strength, the interest, they can pursue it at a higher level. For subjects that they are not either their interest or they're not so strong in, they offer it at a lower level. With that, you open up the flexibility of pathways and give more choice to the students. The last level of flexibility is to help us to be more nimble as a system. Because when you have hundreds of schools trying to work together, trying to move in the same direction, it is not so easy to be able to cater to the difference in student profiles and needs across the schools. So our schools are organized in clusters of about 12 schools headed by a superintendent. And within the 12 schools, there's a lot of opportunity to customize and cater to the specific needs of the students within the 12 schools through subject offerings, through cluster programs, and through capacity building of the teachers in the cluster. So with that, we have a more nimble system. Almost every cluster can afford to customize and adjust its offerings based on the interests and aspirations of the students. Thank you.
Thank you. You're teaching at the right level and doing it at, taking that principle at scale is very inspiring. Thank you for that. Mr. Kumar, I'll close with you. I wanted to take the mirror question in your context, which is to understand what policy reforms under the NEP promote imparting of future skills to school children.
Thank you. I think it's in the fitness of things that the last question is also the shortest question.
But may not have the shortest answer.
And we've been here and we've been talking about it. And I guess we've been looking at education is a continuum. And I think this is the foremost thing which NEP recognizes, that there is absolutely no separation between learning, between humanities, between arts, between science and vocational education. So it's a centrality of experience which you go to school. That is what the NEP recognizes. Before I answer this question, let me give you a little data on the kind of enormity of the situation which is there with us. We were talking about skilling with speed and scale, and I think nowhere it matters where more than people who are part of the education department. We have 260 million children in K-12. And out of this 260 million children, if I were to look at people who are part of class 6 onwards, we are looking at 150 million students. These 150 million students are actually in about 700,000 schools. Altogether, we have about 15 lakh schools, but if you were to just subtract the primary schools, then we have about 700,000 schools. And we have 9.5 million teachers who need to be brought on board to be able to run this vocational education and to implement national education policy. So that is the challenge. If you look at the national education policy, it envisages and it mandates two things for us. First, it says that by 2030, the GR for secondary education should be 100%. What does it mean? As of now, our challenge is that my transition rate for higher secondary schools is 65. That means if 100 students are joining class 1, 65 are doing class 12. I need to take it to 100. And that the timeline we have is the next 7 years in front of us, by 2030. It also says that the GR for higher education by 2035 should be 50. Now look at it in terms of numbers. If the current numbers were to continue, then we would be having about 2 million children who will be getting out of class 12th every year. And out of this 20 million children, 10 million would be joining the higher education system. So where do the next 10 million go? So they need to go where they can find avenues for self-employment. They need to find avenues for being able to do things in the industry in collaboration with the industry. And if you remember, if you recall the Honorable Minister in his introductory speech, he mentioned that we will be in a position, or we should be in a position to be able to provide at least 25% of the skilled workforce around the globe. So this also will need to factor in. So look at it from the numbers point of view. I think the NEP begins very early. If you're going to talk about lifelong learning, then NEP begins with the foundational literacy and numeracy in the 5+3+3+4, which you say. So if your initial foundational literacy and numeracy is strong, then your lifelong learning comes on a very strong platform, and it eases everything. So I think this is the focus of the national education policy, that we should be able to look at our pre-primary class 1, class 2. So that is one. The second thing which the NEP says is learning has to be competency-based, and it has to be experiential. So what do I mean by saying experiential? Art is integrated in it, vocational education is integrated in it, sports is integrated in it. And earlier, we were bringing in vocational education from class 9, 10, 11, 12. So it was compulsory in 11, 12, but 9, 12 we introduced it. But now NEP says that you introduce it from class 6. And it also mandates that by 2030, at least 50% of the students who are part of our schooling system should have had some experience of vocational education. So this is the second part it talks about. The most interesting part is what we are grappling as of now is that it gives us a mandate to rewrite our books and develop them altogether anew. So the National Steering Committee, which has been formed, it is developing the national curriculum framework for the 5+3+3+4. That is the system. So all the textbooks are going to be developed, keeping in mind that there is no hardcore separation between all. Now, assessment is extremely important for us. How you learn, what you learn, to a very large extent depends on how you're going to be tested on it. And we talked about national curriculum, national credit rating framework. Our challenge is, how do I bring in a certain uniformity across the country? We have 62 school boards across the country which are working, including the 2 national ones we have, CBSE and ICSE. So NEP mandates that there would be an assessment agency called Parak. It has been set up within the ambit of the NCERT. It is going to do the National Achievement Survey, it is going to do the State Achievement Survey, but overall it needs to bring all the 62 school boards on a ground. And once the 62 school boards are on a particular platform, managing NCRF through that school boards also becomes extremely imperative for us. So that is extremely important, and we are working on that. So, and once the textbook comes, let's say in about another 8-9 months, our Honorable Minister has given us a timeline that these books must be ready and be operationalized and rolled out by the time the academic session for the year 24-25 begins. So we are looking at it. So these books are going to give a very holistic experience, no hardcore separations. These are some of the things we need to do. And I think the last point I would want to sum up what the Honorable Ambassador from Singapore, he mentioned when he mentioned about Lee Kuan Yew, that no child to be left behind. Everybody should have a job. A good paying job lends social esteem. And I guess this is what we are looking at, and this is what the NEP also intends to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. That was a fitting note to close this wonderful panel discussion. I thank all of you for your inputs and insights, which were very inspiring. I'm hoping that this is just the beginning of this. Just doesn't end with this takeaway, but this can lead to also actionable initiatives and policy reforms going forward. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, for your very insightful deliberations and taking key learnings from both the countries. We'll request our Singapore delegation to kindly take their respective seats in the audience and request our Indian delegation to kindly remain on stage. May I now invite Ms. Melissa Koo, Deputy Secretary, Higher Education and Skills and Head of the Delegation of the Ministry of Education, Singapore, to please come here and make the concluding remarks.
Honorable Minister, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I think listening to the presentations and the joint deliberations by the panel, I can really feel the energy, purpose, and conviction in this room. And I think safe to say that today's workshop really has been very valuable in inspiring ideas and insights, but also in brokering, I think, new friendships and networks across colleagues from India and Singapore. So I'm not going to undertake the impossible task of trying to sum up all the rich discussions today, but perhaps I just share a couple of quick reflections. And I think one common thread running across all our three thematic sessions today, and what our panelists have also shared, really speaks to the need for systems development approach at speed and at scale. If I end off with three reflections, maybe I will group them around three C's, okay? The first C is capability. You spoke about the integration of skills into the curriculum, the capacity to execute, as seen in the competencies and professionalism needed from our educators and our trainers. But I would add that another key capability is really system integration. System integration across the jobs and skills value chain. And what I mean is that upstream, we need a view. This means having a view also of how the economy is changing, how industry and businesses are transforming, what are their workforce development needs, and from there we can inform our skills development approach. And then further downstream, when we look at our training institutions, how do we raise the quality of our training offerings? How do we put in place a good quality assurance framework to measure and monitor outcomes so that we have sustainable outcomes? The second C is collaboration. And I think to respond to today's and our future challenges, we need a new way of working, a whole of economy approach, a whole of society approach that brings together government, employers, industry associations, our higher education institutions, our training providers, working together to pilot new models of training in our skills ecosystem. And in the process of partnership, I think we all also learn by doing, and we build trust in the process. The third C is context, C for context. I think all the solutions and interventions and reforms that we talk about today really need to be fit for purpose and tailored to our respective governance contexts. So as someone mentioned just now already, alluded to the differences between Singapore and India. Singapore is a very small city-state, and India has to respond to the issue of scale and complexity in your system. And that will also require continuity of purpose and the sustained ability to execute. But perhaps one suggestion is to also pilot, some of the new ways of doing things, start with a couple of sectors, and we will learn by doing. So in closing, just as we have benefited, I think, from hearing about your challenges and opportunities, I hope that the experiences that my colleagues have shared have been valuable for all of you today as well. And I leave you, I think, just to, at least me to really thank all of you for participating so actively in the workshop. As I mentioned earlier, I think all of us gained something also from the collective wisdom in this room. I'd like to thank also MSDE for organizing this fruitful workshop, and for our hosts also for your very warm hospitality, for giving us a wonderful glimpse of Odisha's rich heritage and culture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Melissa Koo, for your concluding remarks. You gave us the Troika mantra of capability, collaboration, and context, which will be extremely helpful in taking the way forward. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my proud privilege to invite Honorable Minister Shri Dharmendra Pradhanji. Sir, may I request you to kindly give your concluding remarks.
Thank you, friends. Thank you for this day-long workshop of Singapore and India. I'm happy at the end, the recommendations were very specific. All the breakaway group in charge and all the panelists, and finally, Madam Melissa Koo has very nicely summarized the outcomes. For a government, for a society, for a country, the most important part is to how to engage the younger community of the society. Today, in our demographic profile, around 40% is of younger generation in our society. The working age group 15 to 35 in this bracket, around 40% they represent. And there are two different countries. Singapore is a very niche model, I can say. I will not say small, it's a niche model. When during the bilateral meeting we were talking to our ambassador, our school education secretary, with a joyful mood he mentioned, the entire population of Singapore is 5.5 million. And he was mentioning about school, one batch of school is 20 million. But I personally believe, who can be a model? A critical minority is the model. For me, Singapore is a critical minority in this competitive economy world. I had been to Singapore, I know the physical limitation of Singapore. I know the multicultural challenges within Singapore. Few decades ago, the present day Singapore was not in this shape, but with determined effort, with determined strategy, Singapore is a global role model today. So theories, ideas never came out of a big mass. Theory, idea, innovation came out of a determined critical minority. For me, Singapore is a determined critical minority, is a catalyst for all of the global policy practitioners. In other hand, India is a big country. India has its different layer of opportunity, challenges, and its different cultural background, different language. There are 22 scheduled languages in our country. More than 300 spoken languages are in our country. There are different economic strata in our society. Unfortunately, due to a long period of colony, somehow in India we are struggling with one challenge, that is social status oblique degree versus competency versus skilling. I was jokingly saying, some of my friends in our countryside, in our cities, Dharmendra Pradhan, double MA from Utkal University and from Delhi University in diploma. I am very proudly put forth my nameplate in this way. But I am not so important for, rather than me, the tailor of my small town, the laundry man of my small town, the scooter mechanic of my small town is more important than me according to competency. But my social prestige, my social status due to my double MA and diploma in language is more important than his social status. In the 21st century, this is the first challenge in front of our country, where the 40% is of younger population, how to create a seamless mechanism. And here our national education policy and robust economy nature give us opportunity to rethink in all these issues. A progressive society, a open society, an intellectual or thinking society can realign according to the time. And India is a progressive society, India is a thinking society, and India is an open society. That's where Prime Minister Modi had been personally visited your IT. And he, when coming back to India, when he was talking to the knowledge vertical, especially the skill group, he's very focused on how to replicate, how to create a new model. That is the primary cause we all are here together today on the sideline of G20. I think this is a very fruitful architect we are developing. I am little bit very orthodox on outcomes. I am little bit critical, I am little bit harsh to my colleagues. I beg apology to all of them. But I say this is a good beginning. An institution like ISB is moderating this entire effort, and a critical catalyst, Singapore, is with us. We have to create a global model. Friends, this association is not going to limit it only up to our mutual interest. This model will create inspiration for all the developing countries. With this target, I am happy on all the critical three areas: how to create skill ecosystem in schooling, how to align the TVET in our existing higher education ecosystem, and how to create a new ecosystem for lifelong learning, looking into the future challenges for the future ready jobs. We have to analyze our problem. We have to categorize our geographies. We have to, because this is a very win-win position for everybody. India has its own adaptability capacity. Today, why India's data is so cheap in comparison to other parts of the globe? Because lot more people are using data. Data is the new oil. Now we have a network of big data between Singapore and India. This is not a physical institution we have created. We have to create, we have a tie-up today with UPI. But it's not only issue of exchanging or creating, facilitating currency exchange. It has to go beyond that. So in all this area, with a robust economy engine, with a robust manpower, Singapore has demand, we have capacity to supply their global need. That will benefit both of us. Let us create this architect in these three fronts. Let it be in the, if everything went well, we are meeting in May, we are meeting in June also. When my colleague, Education Minister of Singapore will be here in India, in Pune, for the ministerial round table discussion in the fourth working group, at the end of the fourth working group, we must augment our understanding. We must step up with new framework. How do we move ahead? Engaging with Singapore is not a new thing, but create a pan-Indian framework, starting from school to lifelong learning process. We must have an architect by end of June. Usually in July our functional academic year starts. Let us create an ecosystem from July onward. On a pilot mode, this Singapore-India joint effort should have its impact in our education system in India, where industry will be an important partner, academia, industry and policymaker will work in tandem in a time-bound manner, and I propose two things. One, this architect, let ISB envision that in very professional and detailed manner. Number two, I urge my colleague from the administration, this is a time for India to create an institution for skill mapping. What is the skill in the global sphere? Everybody is talking about semiconductor, everybody is talking about hydrogen energy, everybody is talking about sustainability. Everybody is talking about millet, Sri Arnav in India. These are the new emerging things in the society. India is opening its space policy. New jobs will, new venture will be there, new jobs will be there. But is India ready to map all these aspirations? As and today, there is no joint mechanism. We know how much effort we have to do to create a national credit framework. And Mr. Tiwari has a pen. मैं अब इसको हिंदी में बोल देता हूँ. सिंगापुर वाले ना समझे तो अच्छा है. मित्रों, ये जो चैलेंज है हम लोगों के सामने, डिग्री भारत में चाहिए, लेकिन बिना तिवारी जी के कुछ संभव नहीं है. हमारे यहाँ दो तिवारी हैं, सेक्रेटरी तिवारी है, एनएसडीसी तिवारी भी हैं. इन दोनों की ये सिंबल है. और कलसी जी हमारे भीष्म पितामह बैठे हैं, उन्होंने एक नया आर्किटेक्ट लाया. एक he has created common architect binding point, the new code, and I am happy. The most effective regulator, most, I will not say tyrant regulator, most fearful regulator at one point of time, it was. Then it was, I am appreciating your analysis. Now he is a facilitator. This is a new approach of Indian knowledge vertical. These three secretary represents three streams of the Indian knowledge system. Mr. Sanjay Kumar will take care of from the age 3. And Mr. Atul Tiwari's vertical will be so attractive. Nobody will go to Sanjay Murthy's vertical. Then productivity of the country will increase. employability will increase. So we have to deal in this degree versus competency debate. Now, we have to envision a scenario where competence will prevail. For that, we must have a, but I don't know who will, I hope all three of you will sit together. Mr. Sitaram will be there, Mr. Kalsij is there, another big Sankaracharya, Mr. Jagdish Kumar is there, UGC, NCRT, AICT, NCBT, all should come together and create a framework for the future skill mapping framework. And Singapore should help us in this area, and happy with a short and very focused manner. We have discussed lot of things. I wish this debate, this deliberation will go on. This is a continuous process. As I said, mapping the future skills is not a static thing, one-time job. It's a continuous job. So this framework, those who are today here in this conference, they are lifelong partner of this initiative. Self-proclaimed lifelong partner of the, in the era of knowledge, era of internet, your idea is important. Your suggestion is important. And government, my Prime Minister has a very philosophy. Minimum government, maximum governance. I am proposing all the departments as a facilitator, let us come together, we will create a new model for India in 21st century. Thank you, friends.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for your guidance and inspiring words of wisdom. You have succinctly summarized by throwing light on both the challenges and its possible solutions for India to emerge as a world-class skill, entrepreneurial and educational hub. Ladies and gentlemen, we now have presentation of mementos, and firstly we will present the mementos from India to our Singapore side and then vice versa. So may I request Ms. Melissa Koo, Mr. Simon Wong and Mr. Francis to kindly come on stage. May I kindly request Shri Atul Kumar Tiwari ji to also join us on stage. May I also invite Mr. Sanjay Murthy to join us on stage. And may I request Mr. Sanjay Kumar to also please kindly come on stage. May I firstly request Mr. Sanjay Murthy to kindly present the first memento to Ms. Melissa Koo. And may I request Mr. Atul Kumar Tiwari ji to present the memento to Mr. Simon Wong. May I request Mr. Sanjay Kumar to please present the memento to Mr. Francis. Ladies and gentlemen, these are beautiful handcrafted paintings from Odisha done on the talapatra or the palm leaf. May I request Shri Atul Kumar Tiwari ji to kindly felicitate Shri Nirmaljeet Singh Kalsi. Sir, may I request you to join us on stage. May I now invite Professor T.G. Sitaram, please join us on stage, and request Shri Atul Kumar Tiwari ji once again to kindly felicitate him. Now, our Singapore delegation would like to felicitate our esteemed dignitaries. Sir, may I please invite Honorable Minister to please join us on stage. Ms. Melissa Koo would like to felicitate you on behalf of her country. Thank you. Ms. Melissa would also like to felicitate Shri Sanjay Murthy. Now she would like to felicitate Shri Sanjay Kumar. And also to Shri Atul Kumar Tiwari ji. May we request for a group photograph? You have a group photograph, please. I would like to now request Dr. Manish Mishra, Executive Vice President Strategy from the National Skill Development Corporation, to kindly propose a vote of thanks.
Dear esteemed guests, I would like to, on behalf of Ministry of Skill Development and Ministry of Education, extend my sincere gratitude to the distinguished visitors from Singapore, speakers, panelists, and participants who made the session on future of work, skill architecture and governance model of India and Singapore a resounding success. Your presence and participation has been crucial in making the session informative and thought-provoking. Thank you very much, Honorable Education Minister and Minister of Skill Development, Shri Dharmendra Pradhanji, for delivering an enlightening keynote address and also a very, very clear concluding message. Our sincere thanks to Mr. Chanshun Singh, Honorable Minister of Education, for joining and delivering his perspective messages. Thank you for all the participants, for various groups, for various the contributions that you make, which were very, very insightful and would help us take this dialogue further. A special thanks to the Ministry of Skill and Entrepreneurship Secretary, Shri Atul Kumar Tiwari ji, Higher Education Secretary, Shri Sanjay Murthy ji, NCVT's Chairperson, Shri Kalsi ji, and Shri Sanjay Kumar, Secretary, School Education, and Professor T.G. Sitaraman, Chairperson of All India Technical Council. We express our gratitude to the participants who have joined virtually also from the Singapore. Thank you very much for making those rich contributions. We would like to now invite you to join us for lunch and also visit our exhibitions on the future of work. Once again, thank you very much for your valuable contributions and look forward to your continued support and our continued collaboration.